afternoon. I'd like to welcome you all to another podcast of Dis Life Stories. This time we are talking with Sam. My husband Tony had just interviewed Art. This is her husband. That was her husband. And we're going to get Sam's take on Art's journey through his injury, his disability, his recovery process. Again, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We want to get this out to people so that we have survivors out there, we have support people out there that know you're not alone. Let's build that community where we can all talk. So, welcome aboard, Sam. It's nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Erica.
Okay, so to start with, can you recap what happened, what caused regarding the accident from your perspective?
Well, we had gotten up that morning to go to a funeral. My daughter's best friend had passed away in a motorcycle accident, and we were headed out to go to his ash scattering. And we had left the house. My husband usually doesn't drive on the weekends because he was driving all week, hours in the car. But that morning he said, I'll drive. I said, okay.
Okay.
And so we got into the car and we were literally 5 minutes from our house. And we were in a 45-mile-an-hour speed zone. We were only probably going about 40 because we had just taken off from a stop sign. And all of a sudden I saw the car. I saw the car in our lane. But by the time I turned to look at him to say something, anything, it was too late. It was too late. The car hit us and it seemed, if you've ever watched a movie where they show an accident in slow motion, that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like you were in slow motion and it just feels like everything's just like, whoa. And it felt like we were spinning like forever. And I don't remember. The funny thing is that prior to this accident, we've had cars with airbags for quite some time now, but never once has an airbag ever been deployed.
Right.
And that was always my fear. What happens when an airbag deploys? It's like, how bad does that hurt? And
Ouch.
when it happened, you know what? It happened so fast. You don't even feel it. You don't even know. You don't even know what happened. It just happened so fast that it's just like, you have no idea what's going on. And I just remember when the car finally came to a stop, it's like that moment of that just happened. What just happened? Am I dreaming? What is happening here? And I remember looking at Art and he was just kind of like in the seat, kind of slumped in the seat. And I was like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he wasn't answering me. And then he finally spoke and he said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I think so." I said, "I think my eye is bleeding." And I said, "But I think I'm okay." And then he asked our daughter if she was okay. And she was like, "Yeah." And asked Nick, my daughter's boyfriend, "Are you okay?" And he said, "Yeah." And I just remember Art saying, "I see smoke coming from somewhere. Get the girls out of the car." So I told Nick, I said, "Don't worry about me. I can open my door. Go get Nella out of the car." And so he went around to her side and I opened my door, but I was so confused and out of it. And I was holding my eye and I was screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God." It's like I couldn't register what was happening. And seriously, at that moment, I thought I lost my eyeball. I really did. I thought my eye was like out of my head, was what I thought.
Wow.
And I literally slid out of the car like a snake, hands first. I slid out of the car and I hit the ground. And I'm sitting there going, "I think my eye is bleeding. I think my eye is bleeding." And then everyone's going to laugh at this. I stopped for a moment and I went, "What's that smell?" Because I thought, I'm like, "Is it
Yeah.
blood? What is it?" And I was like, "That's my damn coffee." My coffee exploded and hit me in the face. So what? My eye was not bleeding. I did damage my eye, but it was not bleeding. And I'm like, okay, phew, it's just coffee. Now I can kind of calm down. So, and then I remember Nick going over and getting Destiny out of the car, and me and Destiny just sat there in the dirt. And I think we were both just like, and now keep in mind, it's early in the morning. It's still dark outside. Sun has not come up yet. It's still dark. And she was just like devastated. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do. She's like, and so I told her, I said, well, first you need to text Victoria and tell her we're not going to make the Ash. Victoria was Akeen's wife. So we're not going to make it. Not going to make it there. And I said, let her know we may not even make it to the funeral. I mean, we had no idea how severe everything was going to be. We just didn't know. But in all honesty, I see Nick, he's over at the passenger side of the car and he's pulling on the door, on the driver's side. He's pulling on the door, pulling on it. And he can't get the door open. And Art is saying, well, I'm pinned and I can't get out. And Nick's he's wrenching on the door. He couldn't get he did bend the door. He bent the door frame over the window part. Yeah. But, they say in moments like that, you gain almost like a superhuman type strength. And he did. He bent the window. And it seemed like hours before the ambulance and the fire trucks and all that got there. And they finally get there and they had to use the jaws of life to get Art out of the car. In all honesty, between that time, I never approached the window, not even once. I was terrified of what I was going to see. And I thought, if he's going to die in there, I don't want to see him like that. That's not the memory I want. I don't want the memory of him dead in that car. And
yeah.
So I waited for the ambulance to get there and the fire trucks to get there. And they finally got him out. And it took a long time. It took a long time to get him out. And they finally got him out. And one of the firemen came over and he said, we're going to be rushing him to the hospital. We're going to take him to a trauma one center in Moreno Valley. And he said, I'm not going to lie. He said, it doesn't look good. And your husband is critical. I said, okay. And I waited for an ambulance to come. An ambulance took Nick and Destiny in the same ambulance, and they took them to the same hospital as where Art went. And then my ambulance showed up, and I wasn't quite sure why I needed to go in an ambulance. I'm like, I don't. But they took me and they did some x-rays and I was fine. They didn't know anything about my eye at that time. That's something that came up at a later time. And I was pissed because,
They might have taken you assuming that you were going into shock too.
Possible. They did x-rays, they did all that, and then told me I was fine. And then they released me and my mom came and got me. The thing that pissed me off was though, that my whole family went to one hospital except for me because they did not have room to take me. Why? Because they took the guy that hit us to that hospital. And I mean, I am ashamed to say at that moment, I'm like, you could have just let that son of a bitch die right there in the car. I don't really give a crap. That's how I
And
felt.
any
That's
wife
how
that
I
loves
felt.
her husband would have felt the same way. If
Yes.
that happened to Tony and I would have been going after and pushing him off the damn bed when I got
I'm
to there.
telling you what, you know what? And that's the thing. If I told my husband, I said, God really had his hand on me that morning because if I had been within my right mind frame at that time, I can't even tell you what I might have done had I been able to walk over to that car. And then the police came. Well, the police came before the ambulance came and they questioned me and asked me where we were going. And this is how confusing the whole thing was. So we were traveling north on Lakeview where the accident happened because we were headed to Big Bear. Okay. So we were going north. The police officer said, where were you going? I said, we were going to Big Bear. And I pointed this way. And he goes, you mean you were going to Hemet? And I said, no, I was going to Big Bear. And he goes, okay, but sweetheart, Big Bear is that way. I thought we were on the other side of the road. I thought we had spun completely around and we were on the other side of the road. So I thought I was pointing north, but no, I was pointing south because we were on the same side of the road that we started on. Said something about the other driver. And he said, well, we haven't been able to talk to him yet. He was taken to the trauma center. Found out later he had a busted femur. Big deal. Anyways, I got to the hospital. So when I got home that afternoon, I I knew where they had taken everybody. Then I told my son who lives in Arizona, I said, you need to call the hospital and find out what's going on. I said, because they're taking me in an ambulance. I can't call right now. I need to know what's happening. So he called. And then when I got home, they told me, I'm sorry. Um, we can't tell you anything. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? So we can't tell you. I said, this is my husband. He goes, yeah, but your point of contact is his son. I said, you mean our son? He goes, point of contact is his son. Well, I'll have to call him. They actually called my son and said, hey, your dad's wife called and wants to know if she can get information on. He goes, you mean my mother? So my son had to authorize me to talk to my husband. Yeah. Oh, that's a good one. So to be honest, I really didn't know what was going on with my husband for several hours after that. The doctor finally called and said that they had gone in, they had done the x-rays, he had a broken pelvis, and that's about all they knew at that time. They said, we're going to be taking him in for exploratory surgery because we need to make sure that there's no internal bleeding. Because usually with pelvic fractures, there is internal bleeding, and most people don't die from the pelvic fracture. They die from the internal bleeding that happens after the fact. So, but they said it's touch and go right now. The next 24 to 48 hours are going to be critical. So we'll keep you posted, is what they said. So keep in mind, this is also during COVID time. So it's not like I could go to the hospital and go see him. They wouldn't let me in. And so I had to rely on my daughter to give me information because she was already there at the hospital. They admitted her and her boyfriend for 24-hour observation. So they kept them overnight. And thankfully, my daughter only came away with severe contusions from the seatbelt. And I think she had a cut over her eye, a small little cut over her eye. And her boyfriend seemed to be okay. They said also contusions, but we found out later because he wound up having to go back to the hospital. He was having really bad headaches after they released him. So within like the next day, he was only home for like one day, and then he had to go back, and they kept him in the hospital for a few days after that. I guess what happened was when the car hit, since it hit corner to corner like this on the driver's side, the back end of the car like flipped up this way. So when that happened, Nick's head went up into the roof. And so he had like some neck injury stuff going on that caused some severe headaches. But thankfully, those got cleared up because he's training to be an airline pilot. That could have halted the whole thing. But yeah, so he's good now. And then they waited. So the accident happened on a Sunday. They called and said they were going to wait until Wednesday to do the pelvic repair. And I said, why are you waiting? And they said, well, we really want to wait and let some of the swelling and stuff go down. We have him in traction right now. So we're waiting for some of the swelling to go down. The truth of the matter is they didn't want to waste their time doing the surgery if he was going to die. Bottom line, they didn't want to waste their time going in and doing surgery if he was going to die anyway. So they wanted to get him out of that critical 24 to 48 hour period before they went in to do the surgery. And so they went in, they did that one. And then after that surgery, I was able to go and see him. I was able to see him for the first time on Thursday. So 4 days later. I had to get special permission to come in. I had to go through all of these security checks and tests and all kinds of crap before they'd even let me in the door. And then I finally got up there and was able to see him. Then I don't think I saw him again until after, it would have been after he had the second surgery to repair the hip socket. They didn't do that until they did the first one on Wednesday. They did the hip repair on Saturday. That one scared me because they told me that the surgery was only going to take not only, they said the surgery was going to take about 6 hours. It actually took like 9 hours. So for those 3 hours, not being able to be in the hospital and just waiting for a damn phone call, it was murder. It was terrible.
Even being in the hospital, It still would have spiked your anxiety because nobody's coming out to tell you shit.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. So he came through that one okay. And then a couple of days later, they moved him out of ICU into step down ICU. While he was in ICU, he suffered from ICU delirium. That was exciting, getting those phone calls. Yes, the nurse called me. The first time it happened, the nurse called me and she said, "Your husband would like to speak to you." I said, "Okay." She said, "I'm going to forewarn you." I said, "Okay." She said, "He is suffering from what we call ICU delirium." And I'm like, "The hell is that?" And she said, basically, she said, she said, some people aren't affected at all. Some people it affects within the first 24 hours. Sometimes it takes a few days. She said, basically, he's confused. He's on drugs and he's confused and he doesn't know what's happening. There's no windows in ICU, so he can't see outside. He doesn't know the difference between night and day right now. He's confused. So I said, okay. So he gets on the phone with me and he says, "Samantha?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Is this really you?" I said, "Yes, honey, it's really me." And he's like, "You got to come get me." I said, "What?" He goes, "You got to come get me." I said, "Why?" He goes, "They are holding me hostage here. They have me tied. They have me tied to the bed." I said, "Honey, you're not tied to the bed." He goes, "Yes, I am. They have these things on my legs. I can't move my legs." I said, "Honey, you broke your pelvis." I said, "They have you in traction and they have weights on your ankles." And I said, you're not trapped. They're not kidnapping you. They're not holding you hostage." He says, "I'm telling you, they took me down this dark hole in the floor." And I mean, he is just going on. I mean, the story was wild. And I'm like, okay. He goes, "And I think the nurse is trying to kill me." And I'm like, okay. Like, okay. I said, "Okay, honey." I said, "You know what?" I said, "I will talk to them and I will see if I can come get you." I just kind of had to buy into the delirium and just let it go.
Let it go.
And, so that happened a few times. He took the second time, he said, "You got to call my brother." His brother is an ex-Marine and he's got a buddy who is also an ex-Marine who is now a cop in LA. And he's like, "You got to call my brother. He's got to get Angel. You guys got to come down here. You got to rescue me." He said, "It's terrible." He goes, "I need all the people, all the guns. I need everything. They got to come and get me." And I'm like, okay. All right. But there's nothing you can do but just buy into it and just, let it play out. So, yeah.
Yep.
But, it was a little better when he got into step down ICU. So
Okay.
that brings us, to
When
everything
he
else.
got to yeah, when he got to step down ICU, was that like a just a release for you to know that he's better, that he's showing improvement? When was it that you really started seeing improvement in his condition?
I mean, honestly, I don't think I really saw any improvement in his condition until they released him to rehab. When they put him in the rehab, because up until, I mean, he was so dosed up on pain pills and everything else. And I understand why. I mean, if you saw the x-rays after the surgeries, I've never seen so much hardware in a person. I mean, it was just insane. Yeah,
We
you
saw the
guys saw
X-ray
those. Yeah.
picture and it looked
Yeah.
like a little train track all the way across his
Yes.
pelvis.
Yes. Yes. Crazy. And then all the screws and the pins and the everything. And yeah, yeah, it was crazy. So yeah. So they started physical therapy while he was in step down ice. But keep in mind, physical therapy was very limited because there was no weight bearing at all. He could not put any weight on his legs at all. So they were teaching him basically how to slide on a slide board from the bed to a wheelchair. And he kept asking the guy, "Well, when am I going to be able to get up and walk? When am I going to be able to get up and walk?" And then the physical therapist looked at him and said, "Well, you're not." He goes, "I'm here to try to help you transition from life in this bed to life in a wheelchair." He said, "The doctors don't think you're ever going to walk again." And he looked at him and said, "Well, you can get right the fuck out of my room right now." He said, "You can get out." He said, "You can get out." He said, "Because that is an unacceptable answer. And I'm not, no." He said that's not how this is going to end. So physical therapist left and they brought in another one, and then from that point forward, I mean, I know they were just trying to, they were just trying to appease him and just basically said, well, we're just going to, there are things that you're going to have to do. You can't put any weight on your feet right now. So we can't, there's certain things we can't do right now. And then after he was in step down ICU for, I think, like 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half. I want to say total, he was in the hospital for like 2.5 weeks.
Okay. Were you able to
So
see him more than the once, or were you
yes,
still limited?
once he got into the step down ICU, I was able to go see him more often. And then, yeah, I think I only saw him once in the ICU. And then it was like right after the second surgery. They did the surgery on Saturday. And I think on that Sunday or maybe Monday, they moved him to step down. So then I went a few times a week to see him. But between that and my doctor's appointments, it was hard to get back and forth to go see him, because that is when I think, it's all a blur now. I
A
think
lot happening.
it was after he got into step down ICU. That's when I went and saw the eye doctor for the first time, because I noticed that my primary care said, well, your eye is really red. So I think I'm going to go ahead and get you in to see the ophthalmologist and have them take a look and make sure that everything's okay. And then, so it was while he was in step down ICU that I was diagnosed with trauma induced glaucoma in that eye. And so I was going back and forth to the ophthalmologist and to the hospital and to here. And then I'm going here and I'm getting that. And then I had to make all the arrangements to get him into the rehab. So then finally, when he got into the rehab, like I said, it was when he was there and he was finally kind of being leveled off some of the medications and he was a
Okay.
little bit more coherent, that I could see a little light at the end of the tunnel. But honestly, even at that point, I wasn't sure he was ever going to walk again. I mean, this is where we were. I mean, he wasn't able to move his legs at all. He wasn't able to put any, I mean, he could move them, but he wasn't able to put any weight on them. And then of course the bilateral drop foot that he had, and we just weren't sure what the outcome was going to be. So they started doing more therapy though um, in the rehab. Still no weight bearing exercises, but they were allowing him to do certain exercises with his legs and with his upper body, because they said, regardless of what happens with your legs, you're going to have to build up this upper body strength, because it's going to be a long time of you transitioning from this point to that point before you can put any weight on those legs at all. So they did a lot of that. But he was determined. He was determined. He said, I don't know how, I don't know when, but I'm going to walk. And so the first time, so he was home, he was in rehab for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that. And then we had to get a hospital bed in our dining room, because we don't have a compliant hallways. I mean, our house was built in 1970 something. So, they're like 18 inches wide. They're not
Yeah.
wide enough. So we had to put a hospital bed in our dining room. My brother-in-law came and installed a pull-up bar so that he
Okay.
could pull himself into a sitting position. Also adjust himself. When he was in a sitting position, he could pull up on the bar and kind of adjust himself a little bit in the bed. And we
So
had a physical therapist.
just to interrupt here. So him sitting up wasn't putting any pressure on the pelvis or anything for him.
No,
It was good.
no, not enough. No, not enough that it mattered. I mean, they were okay with him sitting. I mean, obviously he could get into a wheelchair, so he was okay with
Right.
that.
Okay.
So we had a physical therapist that came to the house, and that physical therapist, he was really good. He was really good. And while he was getting physical therapy from him, he finally got permission to put, like, it started off small. You could put 25% weight on, but then it was like, you can only put 25% weight on your right foot, not the left, because the left was where he had the hip repair as well. So it started growing. But I remember the first day that the physical therapist had him get into a standing position from the
Yeah.
wheelchair to the walker. And I took a video of it and I sent it to my daughter,
Yep.
and she just started bawling. And she posted it on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook. And I think on TikTok, I don't even know how many views it got, but I mean, even
I don't doubt
strangers
it.
were going, "That's awesome," and it
Yep.
was, so it was cool. That was a good day. That was a good day.
Yeah,
So
definitely. How was your emotional state as you progressed to the point to Art coming home? I mean, high points, low
I was
points.
going through a lot. I was going through a lot. I spent most of my days crying, just not understanding what we were doing. And I mean, I know that we're pretty strong Christians, and while I know not everybody believes that way or takes that route, I was so angry. I was just so angry. There was so much anger there. And
Why us?
right, I could only lash out at God. That's all I could do. I was like, why? Why would you do this? I don't understand. I mean, we lost a Keen who was like a son to us. And now you put us in a position where we didn't even get closure on that. We couldn't even go to the funeral. We couldn't do anything. And now our whole life is a shamble. And why? And I was just so mad all the time. And I remember I was talking to my niece, I believe. I was talking to my niece, Priscilla, and I was telling her how I was feeling. And she said, "You know what, Auntie? It's okay." She said, "You can be mad at God. He can take it." She said, he's a father to all of us, and not all of us are happy with our dads all the time. You know,
It's true.
it's okay. You can be mad. He can take it. And I was like, yeah, yeah, you're right. Okay. And it was just kind of like, but I also felt guilty at the same time because I thought I should be grateful that we're all alive. But I was just so mad at the whole
Yeah.
situation, at what had happened. I couldn't see the grateful side of it. And so when I was going to rehab to visit, Art actually kicked me out of his room one day. I didn't leave. He told me to, but I didn't leave because he was sitting there and he was going on about, you know what, I just have to give all the glory to God. I'm alive. I'm this, I'm that. I'm just grateful for this. And I was such in that anger mode that
Yep.
I was like, I said,
Yep.
yeah, whatever. And I said, I'm sorry. I am just so angry. And I just don't know how you can lay here in this bed in the situation that you are in right now and thank the person, the entity that could have stopped all this from happening. I don't understand. And he said, you know what? He said, if that's going to be your attitude, you can just go. And I was like, fine. I said, look,
I
and I
walked out of
told him,
Tony's too.
yeah. And I said, you know what? I said, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. But I said, you need to understand where I said, I'm out here. I'm running around like a chicken with no head. I'm doing all of these things, trying to prepare for this and prepare for that. And I said, and I just can't find the grateful in me right now. It's just not there. The grateful just isn't there right now. I said, I wish it was. I said, I'm hoping that I will get there at some point, but right now it isn't. So at that point was when I realized, you know what? I need, I need a therapist. I need a therapist because I don't know how to deal with all of this. I don't know how to deal with everything that I'm feeling on top of everything that he's feeling. I mean, my phone was ringing off the hook all day, every day. Just, people calling to see how he was doing.
Checking out.
Then I had insurance stuff going on. I'm dealing with the insurance company. I'm dealing with all of this. And when my insurance company called us the first time, and I will say this, our insurance company was awesome. They
Okay.
took care of us
Good.
right away. There was no wait. I mean, we had the payoff for the car within like 2 weeks, 2 weeks. And I had a $28,000 check. And they paid off the car, and that's what we had left after the value of the car. Oh, because we had just bought that car. So yeah, so
Kidding.
we got a check for 28,000. We were still in the hole a little bit, but I
Well,
mean, as far
yeah.
as because we had made a bunch of car payments already, because we made double car payments for 3 months plus the 30,000 that we put down on it. We were out a little bit, but 28,000 helped, take a little bit of the weight off.
Better
And
than nothing.
yeah, but when they first called me, um, they said, well, we don't have an official police report. You took forever. CHP takes forever to do their police reports. They said, we don't have an official report yet, but we do know from talking to the CHP that they did go in and they questioned the guy that you were in the accident with. And he is saying that you guys came into his lane. I said, I'm sorry, what? And I said, lucky for you, we had a dash cam. And I'll be more than happy to send you that footage. So I did. So I encourage everybody, get a dash
To get
cam.
dash cam.
Get a dash cam. So I sent it to my insurance guy, and I am not even kidding when I tell you this. After he saw the footage and called me, he was actually in tears. He said, I have been doing this for a long time. And he said, after looking at the pictures of the damage and your husband hanging out the window as they were trying to get him out of the car, and then couple that with this dash cam footage, he said, I am broken inside. He said, I have never seen anything this bad, ever. And he said, and I have dealt with people who have died in car wrecks, and it wasn't even this bad. He said, this is bad. So he talked to my husband. He talked to Art at one point, but Art really still has even to this day, not a huge recollection of what happened that day. It's just not there. And I honestly feel like sometimes the brain just shuts down because out of protection mode. So you just don't remember much. But
Mode.
yeah, but I started therapy for myself, and there was just a lot that came up in the therapy because it all went back to not just the accident, but the loss of a Keen and all of that, because I hadn't even had time to deal with any of that. I mean, it was just wham, bam, and it was terrible. And I was sitting there one day and it's still to this day, it's just so dumb. So that morning, like I said, we were dressed to go to the mountains. It was early March. We knew there was going to be snow. It was going to be cold up there. I had gotten chains for the car just in case. And so I was wearing like a pair of hiking boots because we were going to have to hike down to the lake to go spread the ashes. And so I was wearing a pair of hiking boots. And when I got home from the hospital that day, I saw the shoes sitting there and they were covered in mud. And I'm like, I just don't feel like cleaning those right now. And I just left them. Then I went to go pick them up. And when I picked them up, Erica, I just bawled. I just started crying. And I could not stop. And I pulled out the shoe box and I put the shoes in the box, still covered in mud. And when I was talking to my therapist, I brought this up and she goes, would you mind getting the shoes? I said, okay. I pulled the shoes out and immediately just this gut punch again. And I just started bawling. And she said, it's not about the shoes, right? I said, no, I know. I know it's not about the damn shoes. I know it's not about the shoes. And every time I brought up the shoes to anybody else, it's just shoes.
No.
It's just shoes. Just wash them. It's just shoes. And I'm like, and so I actually made a Facebook post about these damn shoes. And I said, no one understands. It's not about the shoes. It's not about the shoes. It's about what the shoes represent from that day. Because I feel like, they're still in my closet in the box. I still have not washed them to this date. It's been 4 years. It's been 4 years. And every time I think about taking them out, just now thinking about it, I'm terrified. I don't want to see them. I don't want to take them out.
You don't want to go back to that.
And my husband said, take them out. I'll wash them. And I said, no, it's not that. It's not that. I said, it's the last thing I have before everything wasn't normal.
Went to shit.
It's the last thing I have before everything changed.
Yes.
And I just can't. And then somebody said, so just throw them out. I said, I can't do that either. I can't. It's like, they're like stuck to me. I can't wash them. I can't look at them. I can't throw them out. I said, the sad thing is I'll probably never wear them again. And I really like them. It really sucks. But, I said, I guess I'll know that I'm fully healed from this journey when I can take those shoes out and clean them. But right now I just can't because we're still dealing with so much. There's still so much going on. But I did therapy for a few months and then then I just had too much to do. I was taking care of him and, literally
Everything
doing
is on your
everything.
shoulders.
Yeah, we had a nurse that came in
So you
a
did
couple
have
times a
some
week.
help.
Yeah. 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 We had a nurse that came in a few times a week just to
Fantastic.
check his vitals and do all of that. And he did wind up back in the hospital about a week after he got home from rehab. And that was the other thing. We got rear ended on our way to rehab to pick him up. Yeah. Yeah. So our new car got totaled. And then our old car that I had just spent like $3,000 on getting roadworthy again. Yeah, we got rear-ended. The damage wasn't bad. But again, the girl that hit us had no insurance, no nothing. And I'm just like, this has got to be a freaking cosmic joke. I just,
You guys are a magnet for catching those people for the cops and the insurance company. Wow.
it's like, well, the girl, she gave the cop her insurance card. But here's the thing. So she gave him her license and her insurance card. And she goes, I'm just so, I, my daughter was driving. I walked away. I walked away because I'm like, this got, I mean, I was just,
Serious.
so the cop looked at my daughter and said, is your mom okay? And she goes, yeah, she just needs a minute. And so she goes, you don't understand. She said, it's been like a month and a half. We had a really bad accident where our car was totaled. And yeah, so he's like, oh my God. So the cop took the girl's information, but he never looked at it. He handed it to my daughter and said, go ahead and get the information. He said, I have to go. He was being called. They were going to raid a house. He was part of a task force to catch
Okay.
child predators. They had caught one and he needed to go to the raid on that.
Okay.
I'm like, well, okay, well, that takes precedence.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. Go get that creep off the road, off the
No
street.
kidding.
So he went to go do that. And I got the information, but we had to go. I had to get to the rehab and
Right.
help get all of his stuff. We weren't picking him up, obviously, because he couldn't get into a car at that time. They
Okay.
had a transport that was getting him. And, so I rode back with him in the transport. No, I didn't. I left, came home and got stuff ready for him in the transport and brought
Okay.
him. But, yeah, so from that point forward, it was really just a whole lot of chaos at that point. I mean, getting him here, getting everything squared away. And then, like I said, about a week later, he wound up back in the hospital. He uh, had a staph infection. He had a staph infection in they think it entered in through the incision, through what he likes to call his cesarean
Jeez.
section incision, because they cut him from one side to the other. They had to repair the pelvis through the front.
To the front.
So yes, so they had to pull everything out, get in there, repair everything, and then put everything back in and stitch them back up. So I said, so how exactly do they do that? Do they just like throw it up in the air and wherever it lands, that's where it goes? I mean, I'm like, you don't have a roadmap to put all that stuff back in there. I'm so confused. But so he wound up with a staph infection, which attached itself to the hardware. So now he's on an antibiotic still to this day for 4 years to keep the staph infection at bay until they can get in and do the surgeries to take all the hardware out. Because
Holy cow.
the only way to get rid of the staph infection is to get rid of the hardware.
Because
So
it's bonded with
because
the
it's
hardware
attached,
now.
it's bonded to the titanium. So there's no way to get it off of there. So they've got to get the hardware out and they can't, everything falls on something else. They can't do, so his bladder fell. Okay. So his bladder is lower than it's supposed to be. They can't do that until they get rid of the hardware. They can't do the hip replacement until they get rid of the hardware. Because with the hardware still in there, all it's going to do, the staph infection is just going to attach itself to more hardware. So
Right.
can't do that. They won't do the They won't do the hardware removal until he loses weight, which same goes with the hip replacement. Even if they could go in and do the hip replacement, they wouldn't do it until he lost weight anyway. So, it's all just this catch 22 crap. He can't lose the weight because he's not mobile. I mean, he walks and stuff, but not enough. It's not like he can go run track. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of stuff he can do to help lose the weight. They wanted him to go in for bypass surgery, for gastric bypass, and he said, absolutely not. I'm not doing that.
Well, the thing too is, okay, so everyone knows when it comes to, getting fit, it's not just exercise, it's also nutrition. But if you start pulling back on his nutrition, that'll affect him negatively as well. And that's another excuse for another delay.
Well, and we have a whole thing going on because they also won't do the hip replacement or the bladder lift until he stops smoking because the bones have to heal. Bones heal slower when you smoke. They said, okay, so his pelvis actually repaired itself rather quickly, more quickly than they thought it was going to.
Okay.
But his hip, that was a different story. His hip retained a fracture for a really long time. And he couldn't be 100% weight bearing until that hip repaired. Smoking slowed down the hip repair process. And he didn't, I was so mad. In fact, I was so mad at his coworker because he was in the rehab. He wasn't smoking at all. He didn't even want to. He was on gabapentin, I think. He was on gabapentin. He didn't even have the desire to smoke. None. When they
Yeah, but
took him
that
off the
stuff is
gabapentin,
garbage.
he wanted it back. He wanted it back, and he knew I wasn't going to bring him any. He called his buddy that he was a coworker at the time that lived just literally like 10 minutes from the rehab. He said, dude, bring me some smokes. And Craig did. And I'm like,
No, Tony was the same way because he was on the gabapentin as well. That stuff was garbage. It was messing with his head so much. I think he would have been in a better headspace for rehab if he'd gotten taken off that. And it was because of talking to Art that we found out. And because Art
mm-hmm,
started listing all the symptoms, and
yep,
Tony's like, yeah, I've been here like a month and I don't really care if I smoke or not. And then as soon as we transitioned off of that,
huh,
give me a cigarette, give me a cigarette, give me,
yeah,
you
it's terrible. So
but his
he's like, well, I
personality
need
was
to lose
better.
the weight before I stop smoking. Cause if I stop smoking, I'm just going to start eating. And I'm like, no, you think it'd be better just to go ahead and stop smoking and then deal with the diet? I'm just saying, I mean, I don't know, but he's got to do whatever is best for him. I can't. And I told him that when he came home from the hospital. I said, I am your wife. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not your warden. I will do what they ask me to do for you. And if you don't allow me to do that, I'm not going to fight with you about it. I said, because this is not, you're a grown man. You're a grown man. And I am not going to fight with you about taking medicine or doing this or doing that. I said, you have to be cooperative. And I said, if you're not going to be cooperative, well, then I guess you can just lay in that bed and figure it out yourself. And that's the way I felt about it. And he was like, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but he was actually a pretty good patient for the most part. For the most part, he was pretty good. I was worried because they talked about possibly putting him on like a low dose morphine for the pain and stuff. And I said, oh, I told him, I said, if you're going to put him on that shit, you can keep him in the hospital
Yeah.
because he'd been on morphine before when he broke his back and he becomes just a raging asshole. And I said, no, I'm not dealing with that. No, no, I'm not dealing with that. So he was on hydrocodone, which really didn't, he was on Norcos, it was a higher dose with Norcos, but then they were just like, well, we're going to have to transition you off the Norcos. Tylenol, you can take Tylenol. So yeah, that was fun.
So when all of this is going on, you're also still dealing with the issues with your eye.
Yeah. Basically, what was happening was my eye was just watering all the time. And so when I went to see the ophthalmologist, he said, well, it's because the pressure in that eye is too high. So in that cornea, you have a bunch of little drainage ditches basically around that cornea. Okay. Well, what happened was when the airbag hit me in the face, it damaged a bunch of those drainage things right here. It crushed them. So they were regulating me with eye drops. I had to use like 52 eye drops a day. So between giving him medication and taking care of him, I'm freaking dropping the eye drops, you know. And I said, so I was like, there's got to be a better solution here. I can't just keep doing this. Well, it was helping a little bit. It was dropping my pressure down, but then it started going back up again. So that's when they said, we're going to have, if we don't do this surgery, you're going to go blind. So I said, okay. As a photographer, going blind is a terrifying thing. Terrifying. So I'm like, okay. I started reading up on the surgery, and the surgery alone was terrifying. He said, trust me, it's going to be fine. I'm like, okay, fine. So I go in and they give me the twilight. That's the last thing I remember. I don't remember anything after that. I woke up and my eye was done. I'm like, okay.
They roofied you.
So not exactly. That's what it felt like. Like, who took advantage of me while I was in here? Raise your hand. No. So they fixed it, and then I had to go back the next day. When I went back the next day, he said, the pressure is still too high. I'm going to take you into this other room and we're going to clip one of those stitches. I was like, we're going to do what?
No kidding.
There's scissors in my eye. What are we doing?
No.
So I went in, and they had to like put like one of those eye things in your eye that keeps your eye open. Yeah. So he did that, and he clipped a stitch. And then he said, okay, so I need to see you back here in 5 days. I said, okay. So I went back in 5 days, and the pressure was still too high. So they had to clip the second stitch. I have no stitches left. They wound up having to clip all the stitches. But once they clipped that last stitch, my eye pressure regulated. My last visit to the ophthalmologist was November. I think I went back in November. My pressure is hanging steady. So it's actually a little low. So now I'm suffering from dry eye. So I have to use refresh drops all the time because my eye's really dry. But honestly, I'd rather it be too dry than the other alternative. So, but now I have developed a rapid growing cataract in that eye. So I go back in, this month, actually next week on the 28th. I go in on the 28th. They want to take measurements, and they're going to schedule me for the cataract surgery. Right now, I can see out of that eye, but I don't see well. So I have to have the cataract surgery. I don't have a choice. I told Art, it terrifies me, the thought of going blind in one eye, but it's not the end of the world. I'll still have sight in the other eye, and I just have to go with whatever path God decides for me. I really hate that, honestly, but it is what it is. Yeah.
How would you say that this whole experience from start to finish, how would you say that's impacted yours and Art's relationship?
I think we're definitely closer. I think that having to depend on someone in a physical way, it's different to be dependent on someone monetarily or emotionally. But when you become dependent on someone physically, I think that changes the whole dynamic of things. He really had to depend on me for everything because his mental capacity wasn't even there. He couldn't talk to the doctors. If he had been on his own and they said, okay, here's all your medications, here's what you need to take, he would have either overdosed or didn't take any of them and died. I mean, that would have been it. And I am a huge proponent of, you need to advocate for yourself, especially where medical stuff is concerned. If you feel like something isn't right and your doctor isn't listening to you, you don't shut up until you find the doctor that is going to listen to you. He had to trust me to advocate for him because he couldn't advocate for himself. And in any capacity, medical capacity, the insurance capacity, all of it, I had to take care of everything from start to finish. And I think prior to the accident, we both got comfortable in our separate roles of, I was a stay-at-home mom. He went to work. He brought home the paycheck. He made sure all the bills were paid. Then when you're in that, you don't have a choice. I had to take care of everything. And still now I'm pretty much taking care of everything because it's just easier. I mean, there's just, granted, I've gone back to work, not a full-time job, but I've gone back
You're
to
still
work. And
working.
well, I mean, I didn't work for a long time before that. I mean, I had my photography business, but that was hit and miss. It's not like I was bringing in a huge income from that. I wasn't making $1 million off taking pictures. I had worked for the school district when we lived in Ukaipa. And then when we moved out here, I thought, well, I'll just commute because I was a sub. I was what's called a classified sub. That's the way I liked it. I had kids at home, so it was easy for me to just say, okay, no, I don't want that job today. Or, yeah, you know what? I have time to take that job today. And it brought me in a few bucks to put in my pocket, whatever. But I thought, well, I'll commute. Well, I didn't. So I wound up giving up that job and I just stayed at home. I mean, financially, we were okay. I didn't really need to work. Financially now we're okay, but
Where you were.
we're not as financially secure as we were before the accident because we pretty much went through all that money.
Yep.
Our savings is not looking like it used to. So I decided, you know what? It'll just be easier for me to go back to work. But now I'm working, I have a permanent position with the school district though.
Okay.
So not a sub position. It's a
Wow.
permanent. So I do 3 3/4 hours a week in a special education class for 7th grade
All right.
as an
And how
instructional
is that
aide.
was that going for you? I mean, is it something you're enjoying getting back to the workforce or
Yeah, I do for the most part. I do enjoy it. Special education, since I started as a sub in Ukaipa, that's kind of always had kind of a special place for me. I enjoy working with the kids. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There's been a couple in there that have been a handful. Like before I was working with kids who had like severe autism and kids
okay.
that were in wheelchairs and kids that had Down syndrome and stuff like that. These kids are mostly mainstreamed for the most part. They come to our class as academic support.
Or the stuff
So,
that the overloaded teachers are like, I am not dealing with this.
right.
Take it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we help them with all of that. But it's been a challenge, but it's been fun. I'll do it again next year. I'm going back. I already got my letter saying I'm coming back. So I'll go back.
Awesome. So are there any things that I mean, aside from the change in roles that you already mentioned, are there any other things that you have to do, whether daily, weekly, monthly, to help Art, or is he pretty much okay on his own?
Well, once a week, I put all of his pills together for the week.
Yep.
I send him in his lunchbox in the morning. Doesn't mean he takes them, but I send them. I'm still, trying to schedule all of his appointments for him because, he still has a lot of appointments that he has to go to.
Yes.
A lot of blood work going on because when they found the staph infection, they also found that his kidneys were malfunctioning. So he was seeing a nephrologist. That's a mouthful. A nephrologist I've learned all kinds of terms that,
Yep.
hey,
Yep. That's what
he sees
Google's for.
he was seeing a nephrologist for a while that he had to see him like they would just do like video calls about once
Okay.
every 3 months. Now it's like once a year that he still talks to him. So he's got that coming up in June just to make sure. But I forget what they said he had. Basically, at this point, there's really not any trace of it. There's no cure for it, but there's not any trace for it. So it's like he's kind of in remission or whatever. So he's doing well though. I mean, his kidneys and everything are okay now. I help him every morning get ready for work. I mean, he can do it on his own for the most part. He can even get his work boots on and stuff and lace them up on his own.
Wow.
If but he has to be in a certain chair because he has to be able to sit low enough to the ground. But I mean, knowing that he can do it on his own, though, it does free things up for me because for a long time there, it's like my best friend has a vacation house in Palm Springs and she likes me to come out and spend a weekend or a few days with her in Palm
Right.
Springs. And for a while there, I couldn't do stuff like that. The most I could go anywhere was a couple of hours because I had to come back. And especially during the whole staph infection thing, when they sent him home, I had to they hooked him up with like a catheter in his arm. I had to do the intravenous IV stuff, the antibiotics like three times a
Thanks.
day. So, we had to do that. And so, yeah, I mean, so I learned a lot about that. It took like 5 minutes every night. So I'd be up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, am I doing this right? I don't know. I'm half asleep. God help me. I hope I'm not killing you. Yeah, it was bad. It was bad. But, I did it right. He's still alive. We're good.
So you were Art's main support. Did you have support as well to help you to keep you grounded? Because I know I've shunned support at the beginning and I cracked, and finally I was like, no, I'll talk with Mick and she'll keep me grounded, that kind of a thing. Did you have a kind of a support structure behind the scenes
Well,
for
I mean,
yourself?
we're here in a house with my mom and my youngest daughter and her boyfriend.
Okay.
So my daughter was a huge help. I mean, she had to, obviously she was working at the time. So, she had to go to work, but I had my mom here. And so,
Okay.
my mom would kind of pick up the slack a little bit when I was just
Gotcha.
too tired. There were some days that I woke up in the morning and I'm just like, I just don't even know if I can even get out of bed today.
I
But I
can't
had
do
to
this again.
every
Yeah.
day, I had to. So I had my mom. And then, like I said, I had my therapist and I had my best friend that I could always vent to, you know.
Yep. That helps.
And, there's a whole lot of emotions that go on there. There's a whole lot.
Just,
There's,
yeah.
it's like I said, I was angry with God. I was angry with the guy who hit us. I was angry at the doctors. And sometimes I was angry at him, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just felt like, how much more can you take out of
Yes.
me? Because I just don't have anything left to give. I don't
Yeah.
think that I ever said that out loud
But
because
we still
he was
feel it.
suffering. He was suffering,
Exactly.
but the feelings were there. So there were some
Exactly.
days that I was like, just go in and just put a pillow.
I
You
think you're picking up visuals from my head here.
there are days. There are days. But of course, I never would do that. That's terrible. I loved him and I wanted to do right by him and I wanted to do the right things for him.
But
And,
you get
I mean,
exhausted.
honestly, yeah, I mean, I was exhausted. I fell through the cracks at that point, taking care of myself at all
Yep.
was, you
Yep.
know, I just,
Preaching to the choir.
most of the days I would get up and I was lucky if I took a shower that day. There was just so much going on. So Art and our son, Sean, they put their heads together trying to figure out how can we get him in a car? Because at the time, he was non-weight bearing. He would have to slide into a car. Well, we had
Okay.
an SUV, for Christ's sake. You can't slide from a wheelchair into an
Into an
SUV. That's not
SUV.
going to work. Um, so they put their heads together and said, you know what we need? We need some kind of lift. Well, they found a motorcycle lift. And the motorcycle lift was great, except that it was super heavy. And I would have to move it around and then pick it up and put it in the car and then put his wheelchair in the car and I was exhausted.
Gotcha.
So he started, his brain started working. He's like, I know how we can fix this. I know what we can do. So we went down to his metal shop where he worked and they welded these sleeves, these steel sleeves under the car. And then they welded steel bars onto the motorcycle lift on the side. They took the bottom off of it, welded these things on where it just slid into the car, into the side of the car. And then
Oh,
he'd sit on it and I'd jack him up with my foot and he'd go up and he'd slide into the seat. I'd do the release, take it
holy
down, pull it
cow.
out and stick it in the back of the car. And then they also made a whole wheelchair thing. So it had a ramp to put the wheelchair. You folded up the wheelchair, you push the wheelchair up on the ramp, you closed the end of it, uh, bungee, not, ratchet strapped everything. And then it had bars on it to slide the lift onto. So I never had to deload anything into the car again. It just roll up, ratchet, slip it on and go.
Holy cow.
I think once we were able to have a little bit of mobility, a little more freedom to be able to go and do things, get out of the house. And I think that helped a lot because I do think you just wind up getting cabin fever after a while. You're just stuck in here and you can't go anywhere and you can't do anything. And it was just like I welcomed a freaking 15-minute trip to Walmart. And I think, especially when you're in a situation like that as a caregiver, you have to make that time. You have to, because I don't know what would have happened with my mental state had I not found a way to at least just take some pressure off of myself and just take that time, take that few minutes here or there, I don't think when you get married, you say the vows for better, for worse, and sickness and in health, but I don't think you really realize what that entails until something like this happens. And, I was helping him do things that no human should ever have to help another adult human do. He didn't. Anyways, I don't know if it would have made a difference. When you have children, you wait for every milestone, their first
Yes.
word, their first step, their first this. When you go through this, you're also waiting for those milestones. The first
Milestones.
time they're able to stand up, the first time they're able to go to the bathroom on their
Walk.
own, the first time they're able to walk, the first time they're able to take a shower.
Yes.
For a while after he learned how to walk, he still didn't come into the bedroom because the bed just wasn't comfortable for him with the neuropathy and stuff. But then it came down to, we were having Christmas at our house. And I said, you're just going to have to bite the bullet, dude. You're going to have to start sleeping in the bedroom again. We got to get rid of this bed. We're not having Christmas in the dining room. Okay, we're not doing that. I said, you're going to have to come back to the bed and we're going to have to get back to some kind of normal life. And so he did. We called the company. They came and picked up the bed, and yeah, we bought a $5,000 freaking Sleep Number bed is what we did,
Okay.
because he had to be able to, even now he struggles getting into a sitting position from laying down.
Yeah. Me
So
too.
the Sleep Number, it's easier. He can just lift himself up. It's got the adjustable bed. So I wish our bedroom was bigger though, so that we could have gotten the king size double mattress so that you get the separate
Individual.
adjustables. Cause let me tell you, Erica, let me tell you what I go through right now. If I dare go to bed before he does and I'm asleep,
You
and
get woken up.
he wants to come in and have ice cream or watch TV or whatever. I'm in a nice, comfortable sleeping position. And then I'm like this,
Wakey, wakey, eggs and bakey.
serious right now.
I know that feeling.
God, you suck. So yeah, there's that. So yeah, I wish we'd gotten the dual, had a room big enough to have the dual adjustable, but unfortunately our bedroom's too small to fit a king. So
Let me ask you this. Did it ever get to the point where where you were having such a hard time getting a normal night's sleep? You know what I'm talking about, where you get like the slightest things will wake you up, but then you eventually
well,
kind of relax back.
I've been a really light sleeper for a long time. I think when I hit menopause, something changed. When I hit perimenopause, something changed and I couldn't sleep. When I was younger, I could sleep through a bomb going off on the side of my
Me
head.
too.
But now it's like I hear I hear this. I'm like, "What? What is happening?" And it's like, so
Okay.
no, I don't sleep very sound anyways. So I don't think really much changed. And keep in mind too, in the interim of all this, I had a hysterectomy. So while he was in rehab, I had a hysterectomy. And the reason I did that was because I knew he was going to be coming home soon. And, you have certain restrictions after you have a hysterectomy. And I'm like, I'm not going to be able to help him after a hysterectomy. And for like 6 weeks, you can't lift more than like 10 pounds. I'm like, he's more than 10 pounds. So I should probably just get this done and get it over with. Apparently, I had cysts on my ovaries that were so large that they were actually joining up with my uterus. That's what just explains why I was in so much pain all the time.
Definitely.
Yeah, I usually, when he was sleeping out here in the dining room and I was in the bedroom, I would wake up several times in the middle of the night just to check on him. It was like I go back to the baby reference because it's like one of the, you got to go in and make sure,
To
are
see
they
the
still breathing? Yeah, you're like,
yes,
okay, they're still breathing. Okay,
I
it
would
was
put my hand on Tony's chest just to make sure my hand
mhm,
was moving.
yeah.
To this day, I still do that.
I
Not a
don't do
habit
that
I
too
got
much
out of.
now because he snores so loud. I know he's still breathing. Um, so I know he's still alive. It's good. It's all right.
Well, Tony snores too, but that's what the times when I reach out is when he's not snoring, because then I'm like,
Right. It's like, what's wrong? Why isn't he snoring? Yeah. Yes. I have to make sure that before he starts to roll over and stuff in the bed at night, I have my section of the bed laid out. I have to push myself farther away from the edge than I
yeah,
would normally because I know when he's on his side away from me, if at any point he rolls onto his back, that's where he's going to stay.
yeah,
It's just going to be boom. And then so we're here, he's like this, and then all of a sudden he's like this. So I have to have room to be able to scoot over a little bit. So
gotcha.
yeah, it's a whole thing. If you ever saw that I Love Lucy episode where they were in they stayed at like this old hotel thing, and Fred and Ethel's bed was like, it was severely dipped. And so Ethel went over and grabbed Fred by his nightshirt and tucked it under the side of the bed to keep him from rolling that's our life at this point. That is, yes.
She,
Our life is
well,
like an I Love Lucy episode.
okay. And what would you say you've learned about yourself through this whole process?
I think I've learned that I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. I think I learned that I can handle a lot more than I ever gave myself. I think you don't ever think of yourself being in this situation. That happens to other people. That doesn't happen to us. It happens to other people. Yeah. And it's like, and I think you also really learn who other people are through this process. You know, um, we got lucky enough that, he had a really good boss at the time. She took really good care of us for a long time after the accident. And then she had to stop the medical. She couldn't afford it anymore. And then shortly after that, she had to let him go from payroll. And so we had to readjust from there and go, get our own insurance. We couldn't get away from the insurance we had because there was just so much tied up in his care that switching insurance, I was out of the
No,
question.
no,
Out of the question. Could not do it.
no.
Still can't. We still can't. I mean, there's just,
The
um,
history built.
so we readjusted, you know, it was that, I guess maybe the whole COVID thing actually helped, having to pivot from one thing to another all the time. I think anybody that has to take a journey like this learns things about themselves. They learn things about their spouse, sometimes things you never wanted to know. And you learn things about the people that are around you. You learn what people can handle. And it comes to a point where some people, they're like, you know what? I'm so sorry about that accident. That's terrible. If you need anything, please call. You call and they're like, I didn't
I
really
can't.
mean it. Yeah. I'm busy that day. But I didn't
Huh?
even say what day it was. Well, I know I'm busy that day. I didn't lose any friends during any of this. I didn't lose any family during this. Everybody was pretty good.
That's
But you
awesome.
do learn what people can cope with and what people can't. And then people look at you and go, I just don't think I could ever do something like that. And you know what? Probably prior to this, I probably thought the same thing. I don't think I could ever do something like that. But there I was. And
Doing
you
the
love
same
the
thing.
person that's on the other side. So you have to, you
You have
have
to
to.
find a way to make it work.
Yep. Yep. And,
What did
and you
you,
just to be thankful they lived, you know?
God, yes. What advice would you give to somebody that's looking at the facing the beginning of your journey or a similar journey to yours? What would you advise them?
Be diligent, be an advocate, not only for yourself, but for the person that you love, because no one out there cares about the person that you love as much as you do. Research everything. Research everything. Write everything down. had a journal during that time that it's like I had everything written down, because I'll tell you what, no matter what kind of insurance you have. So we have Kaiser. Kaiser it's basically an all encompassing insurance. Okay. Everything that you have as far as your pharmacy needs, your primary care, your experts, your all of that, they're all in one place. Okay. So
Okay.
you're not going from, you don't, okay, well, you need to go see this doctor and he's 2 hours over there. Everything is all right there. It's all encompassing. So you would think, wouldn't you? You would think all of your records, they're all in the computer. Everything is computerized at this moment in time. So you would think that when you have to go to an emergency room or you have to go see a new doctor,
Pull it up. They've got it
everything,
all.
pull it up. Everything's right there, right? No, 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 no. You go into an emergency room, they're going to ask you, so what exactly happened here? So you're going through the whole thing all the time.
Every
So
time.
one of the best ideas I ever had was, I'm going to type it all out. I'm going to print up a sheet that shows everything from day one to here. And I'm going to add to it as we go along. And then I'm going to make copies of it. And when we have to go to the doctor, to a new doctor or to an emergency room, here you go. There you go. It's all right there. It's all right there. Yep. Keep records of everything. Write it all down. I had a file. I had seriously a file that was this big of everything. I had it all divided. This is our health insurance. This is our car insurance. This is everything related to the accident. This is CHP report. This is everything. Keep track of everything, every dime you pay, every prescription you have to pay for. Accurate records. That's the best thing I can tell you. Even stuff that you go and buy at like Walmart. You need gauze for something. Write it down.
Write it down.
Everything I purchased from Amazon, I printed out the receipts. Everything. Yeah. Yeah. I just recently, it was after the court date and everything. Cause I'm like, okay, well, this isn't going anywhere else. We're done. We tried to apply to the state for victim compensation and we didn't qualify. We didn't qualify because and I'm not even kidding you when I tell you this. This is what they told us. You don't qualify because the guy that hit us, he wasn't leaving the scene of a crime at the time. And he didn't hit you on purpose. It was an accident.
On your side of the road
With
to run
drugs
into
and
you
guns in his car.
was an accident.
But he wasn't fleeing a crime, though, Erica. So therefore, we didn't qualify. So yeah, there's that.
Hey,
Wow,
give me 2 minutes. I'll wrap this up so you can spend time with your
no,
granddaughter.
you're
Believe me,
good.
I
You're
get it.
good. You're good.
Well, honestly, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me about this
Well,
and
thanks for having me here.
appreciate all the words. And to everybody else out there, watch, subscribe, give us the like, spread the word so other people can get get motivation, get inspiration, know that you're not alone, know that we're a community and we can all help each other. So thanks again, Sam, and I
Thank
appreciate
you.
your time.
It was good seeing you. Okay. You guys too.
Talk to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.